Welcome back to the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Moving on to the NBA now. We are going to be taking a look at the Milwaukee Bucks, who last night they dropped another game, fall to 1-4 since Doc Rivers has taken over as head coach on the sidelines for them. And we're just going to be sort of asking that question, at what point should we start to worry about the Bucks? Because I want to get ahead of things here. I'm not saying the time is now. They do lose to the Phoenix Suns last night, 114 to 106, but this was a game without Damian Lillard and without Brook Lopez. And then later in the first half, they lost Chris Middleton to a little bit of a freak incident where he came down off of a jump shot onto Kevin Durant's foot and rolled his ankle. So he was ruled out for the rest of that game, did not come back. So the Bucks were essentially down 3 starters for the majority of this game. This is also coming against the Phoenix Suns, who are one of the best teams in the Western Conference, in the upper echelon of teams in the NBA really as a whole right now. So I don't think that you can get on the Bucks too much really for this loss in particular. It was a lot of Giannis just trying to do everything that he possibly could to keep this team afloat with the lack of help that he was getting. And credit him to pushing. He went down at one point. It looked like he was dealing with some sort of a pulled something in his lower back, but he is just such a competitor. I don't think that he really gets the credit that he deserves as far as going out and competing on a nightly basis. He has been really just, I consider him a joy to watch. I know it's not always the most beautiful brand of basketball. There's not the shot making or anything crazy like that, but I just think it's cool to watch this force of nature go to work the way that he does. So it's been a fun watch, but that being said, he obviously is in that top 3, top 4 players in the NBA, and you go out and you acquire a Damian Lillard because Giannis was so hyper-focused on wanting to be a championship contender for this season and the seasons to come that he wasn't fully committal on re-signing with the Bucks until their front office showed that they were as well. So they go out and they acquire Damian Lillard in a trade. They give up Drew Holiday and Grayson Allen and various other things to make this move to get another top-tier player who is going to be starting in the All-Star game this year. Up for debate whether or not Lillard deserves that, but they come out expectations to win pretty much every single night, but that wasn't just enough for them during the course of the season, because when they fired Adrian Griffin, they were the 2nd seed in the East. They were 30-13. So clearly winning alone wasn't enough. They knew that something needed to change. A lot of people talk about the fact that the defense was not good enough, but I think that it probably stemmed a little bit. It sounds like he sort of lost the locker room. Reporters have talked about the fact, I know Chris Haynes specifically covered, at least at the time, during that in-season tournament, there was a little bit of a falling out between him and some of the guys on the team, including Bobby Portis and others, and they didn't fully seem to see eye to eye. So they end up letting him go. They bring in Doc Rivers, who has been known to be very well liked by his players and has had a lot of success throughout the course of his career, but he's also had, obviously, his sort of blemishes on his resume, the blown 3-1 leads with 3 different teams, and coming up short last year against the Celtics. A lot of people defend the job that he had to do against Philly last year. I think that is fair. It wasn't super ideal circumstances given that you were relying so heavily on James Harden, and James Harden just seemed to quit for the second half of the season. So, a lot of people give him a little bit of a pass for the 76ers experiment, but he comes into this situation and they start to drop some games. They are 1-4 since he's taken over, like I mentioned, has a couple blown leads, and really they've been struggling as a whole in the second halves. That's when it sort of got away from them last night against the Suns, but they scored just 19 points in the third quarter against the Denver Nuggets. That allowed them to build up the lead that they carried throughout the game. Portland, that in that really bad Trailblazers loss, that's when they took over, got the lead up to 10 points early in the fourth quarter, and yeah, they battled back some and ended up making that a close game, but they came out flat in the third quarter, and really in that one, defense is obviously still a big part of this conversation. The defense in that game was atrocious from the Trailblazers, who are one of the worst teams in the league. Then against Utah, they blew a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter. They got outscored 40-13 in the fourth. So after entering the fourth quarter with a 12-point lead, they ended up getting blown out in that one. So a lot of slow starts, concerning things going on in the second halves of these games, and just asking the question about when should we start to worry about them, because this is bringing in Doc Rivers, who was not on the roster at all. This is a different scenario than just firing your head coach and having your interim coach be somebody that was already a part of the roster. This is bringing in somebody entirely new. There were some reports that he was maybe a little bit of a consultant on the side with the Bucks prior to being brought in, but he wasn't actually in the building getting to know these guys and be up there close and personal, and now he's done so. So to the 1-4 record to start, I would like to, first acknowledge the fact that, again, they were 30-13 when they fired Adrian Griffin. Wins and losses were clearly not the only thing for that Bucks organization if they were willing to part ways with Griffin after the very successful regular season start they had. They have their eyes on the playoffs. That's all that matters for them. And this is a move that they believe can help turn them around by the time the playoffs come around. Winning a 20% rate is not in the future for the Bucks, I don't think. And, it hasn't been the easiest schedule in the world for them. That Trailblazers loss was terrible. But some of these games that they've lost to the Nuggets and the Suns. And again, the way that Jazz game played out was really bad, but that was a game on the road against the Jazz team that I think has really been figuring things out and are a really tough out night in and night out. Again, getting outscored 40-13 in the fourth is horrendous, and to not ever really bounce back from the way things are playing out is a very tough look. So they definitely need to get better. There's no doubt about that. But I wouldn't be going full panic mode yet. This has been such a short period of time, and we are still, I wouldn't say early in the season, but we're at the halfway point. There's still a lot of basketball to be played. We're not even at the All-Star break yet, which sort of takes me into the timeline of when we should start to worry a little bit more. Because Doc Rivers, interestingly enough, actually, was technically selected to be the head coach of the Eastern Conference, because the way that the rules work out, typically the coach for the conference is the head coach of the team in the conference that has the most wins. But you're not allowed to coach the All-Star game 2 years in a row. So the Celtics' Joe Mazzulla is not eligible to coach again, so it falls onto the second seed, which is the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, I know that they've fallen since then, but they were initially the 2 seed when this was selected, so that was, interestingly enough, Doc Rivers. He has opted to sit out the All-Star game, let some of these other coaches that have been present for the entire year take over. There's an All-Star bonus that is given to these coaches, so a good move in my opinion on Doc Rivers, but then that takes us into after the All-Star break. That's when we sort of have to get this thing ramped up if we're going to be considering the Bucks a legit contender. They have, what is this now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games until the All-Star break. So again, a little bit of a short sample size here. I wouldn't be putting all too much stock. Now, I think that it's interesting sort of the lineup trends that we're seeing. We're seeing a lot less of the young guys. And I really like Andre Jackson for the Bucks. The forward out of UConn was with the championship team last year. I think that he's going to develop into a really good defender. And already we've sort of seen the older guys starting to take over the minutes. Jay Crowder playing more. Robin Lopez. I mean, again, weird injury situation last night for the Bucks. So I maybe wouldn't look too much into the lineups from last night specifically, but that's coming out of that All-Star break is when you sort of want to start hitting your stride. And for the Bucks, I don't think that that's necessarily even fully possible to be fully getting into your groove, because they have to find their groove right now in the first place. You hope that you can maybe put some pieces of that together going forward. Before the All-Star break, Lillard's injury isn't expected to be too serious. Lopez was out for personal reasons. I believe he was having a child. I'm not 100% sure on that fact, but he's also someone that you're not going to have to worry about being out for long term. Still waiting on the Chris Middleton injury update. It says the x-rays were negative. He had a sprained ankle, so he should be fine. At least by the All-Star break, he'll be back, but playoffs start come late March-ish, late April-ish, I should say. And I feel like if that's the case, we should see this team really starting to formulate in March. If they're not there by then, if they're not at a point where they are figuring things out specifically on defense, then I think we start to worry. Now, part of my issue with that, though, and part of the reason why I haven't loved the Bucks all season really, is just sort of the financial situation they're in. They are in the second threshold for the salary cap, which means they're very limited in the types of moves that they can make. It's been rumored that they've been interested in different guys, DeJounte Murray, or they were also interested in Miles Bridges from the Charlotte Hornets. I don't think that they can really make any of these significant moves because I just don't think that they have the assets. They don't have the contracts to really make that work. What's more is with the new CBA agreement, they can't go out and pick up buyout guys in following the trade deadline. And I think that buyout guys have always sort of been maybe a little bit overvalued. How often, other than Kevin Love is the recent example, but I think that was a ridiculous move sort of by the Cavs to just buy him out anyways. But especially if you look how both of their seasons between the Cavs and the Heat played out last year, the Cavs definitely could have used a guy like Kevin Love, and Kevin Love helped contribute to the Heat going on to the finals. So maybe this is a bad time to make that statement, but I think historically buyout guys haven't played a huge difference in championship runs, but even if the Bucks wanted to, they can't, which is the issue. So I've been saying I think it's a personnel thing. I don't think that they can really have the flexibility that they'd like to make moves significantly in the right direction. And as a result, I don't have them as a top contender. I mean, they're in at least the top 4, obviously, but I just haven't ever really taken them all too seriously. But as far as the idea of worrying, saying they can't, because even though I haven't loved the Bucks, if Dame and if Giannis start to get going, and I don't think that there's much you can do, at least defensively, to stop them. If they can figure out a defensive identity, because that's the thing right now is playing a 7-game series, I don't think that they're going to be able to strictly out-offense a team game in and game out. I think it would have to be a lot of self-inflicted wounds in order for the Bucks defense actually to make a stand in a playoff series. But I think that we still have to give it a little more time as far as worrying. I'd say a month-ish. We'll have to check back in as it goes, but they come back from the All-Star break February 23rd, and then sort of from there we can see what trajectory this team is on, and it's something that we will continue to monitor. So we are going to be taking our last break here. When we come back on the other side, we will be sticking with the NBA. We have a trade update from the trade deadline, and we're going to be talking about some of the games from last night. So stick with us.